All right, we're ready. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. Welcome to all the people joining us on the online Zoom. My name is Robbie Donahoe. I'm a member of the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers, Local Union 6 out of San Francisco, and I'll be MC today. So we want to welcome everyone in the room and online to the special event today. It's called A Militant Critique of Labor Notes for a Fighting Workers Movement, occurring on this last day of the biannual Labor Notes Conference, not within the conference, unfortunately. This panel discussion is sponsored by 6 different rank and file union groups who came together around certain points of unity, a shared and deeply felt interest in building a fighting workers movement, and a non-sectarian united front approach to this important work. It's been many weeks in the making, and we hope that everyone will participate in our discussions and find both something that they can contribute to and learn from all of the panelists and the discussion. The groups that are involved here are Teamster Mobilize, the Committee to Organize the Unorganized, Committee for One Fighting Transit Union, Transit Workers for a Fighting Union, Class Struggle Action Network, and the Machinist Reform Action Committee. And there are other groups that have also endorsed, but those are the groups that are participating in the panel today. We believe in workers' democracy, and we really want to have a democratic meeting today, so we're giving equal time to each of the panelists, and later to those audience members who want to ask questions or make comments. I'll announce the agreed upon times for people to speak at the different points. Please start promptly and be courteous when I say the time is up, so that the next person can have a chance. Last thing, please speak directly into the microphone, 2 to 3 inches from your mouth, so that everyone can hear and the Zoom audio can pick it up. No interruptions, please. There will be time for audience participation throughout. So, without further ado, the first point on our agenda is going to be introductions. So, each of the panelists is going to tell us about themselves and their groups, and they're going to have 2 minutes or less each to do that. We'll start with Tom.
Hi everybody, I'm Tom, mechanic from the Brooklyn Bus Division of Transport Workers Union Local 100, an industrial union that represents about 44,000 bus, subway, and other transit workers in New York City. Our group, Transit Workers for a Fighting Union, is a small caucus, but we think we definitely punch above our weight and are determined to grow in numbers and influence. We're openly socialist in a union where Reds of many different stripes have been active for decades. Yet, we're kind of the last one standing and ran 2 candidates for executive board in our union's 2024 election on a program calling for much higher wages to be able to afford to live in New York City, an end to tiers, workers' control of safety, for Black liberation, against anti-immigrant terror, and opposition to both Democrats and Republicans. We said workers should run the country. As you can imagine, we are sharply opposed to the pro-capitalist TWU bureaucracy, and the feeling is mutual. We're dedicated to replacing them with a revolutionary working class leadership, which means raising demands that address our coworkers' real needs and showing that we have a real strategy for winning them through class struggle means. This sets us far apart from those union reformers and wannabe bureaucrats who believe in neither militant struggle nor working class independence, which we know are inseparable. Along with defending coworkers from the bosses, True Fu, which is our name, is heavily involved in our union's current contract struggle as part of the United Front called Transit Workers for a Fighting Contract. And recently, in the Long Island Railroad strike, which was also the expiration of our contract, we leafleted both the LIR workforces and our own calling for joint action. We intervened on the picket lines. But we're also, in words and deeds, opposed racist cop terror, bloody U.S. imperialism against Palestine, Venezuela, Iran, and Cuba, always siding with the oppressed against and advancing in common cause with the international working class. And we're proud to be part of this event and helping us all forge a way forward.
Thank you, Tom. Next, we're going to hear from Chantel.
Hi everyone, my name is Chantel Schultz. I live in New York City. I'm a Teamsters Mobilize supporter, but former member and steering committee member. I worked at UPS Warehouse for 2 years in Secaucus, New Jersey in Local 177. I'm currently in a UAW warehouse in Local 2179, and I'm also a member of UAWD and Maoist Communist Union. And Yeah, Teamsters Mobilize, I'm guessing most people have heard of, and probably have heard of the ban of one of our members and the steering committee member, Colleen Donovan. Why did this happen? It has to do with, where did TM actually come from? TM had to fight for its existence, actually, to become a fighting group in the Teamsters Union. Teamsters Mobilize was formed a few years ago when a group of UPS part-time warehouse workers wanted to fight for part-timer demands in the 2023 contract. Part-timers have been screwed over, obviously by the boss, but by the union leadership for decades. And said to the TDU leadership, we want to form a part-timer caucus to fight for some real demands like a $25 minimum wage for part-timers. And the TDU leadership said, absolutely not. That's divisive, we're not gonna do that. And so people who ended up founding Teamsters Mobilize formed an independent group and really coalesced around the 2023 Vote No campaign for the UPS contract. And that was a very important process because we were talking within Teamsters Mobilize of what do we really want to be? Of course we want to fight for UPS part-timer demands, but we also can't be limited to that. To really do that and to fight within our union, we have to bring in people from across the union, across different industries, but also to see ourselves really as part of needing to fight for a fighting workers movement. Oh my goodness, is that really 2 minutes? I have 2 seconds. Okay, well that's a little bit about the history of Teamsters Mobilize, and I'll say more later.
Now we'll hear from Trey.
Yep. Howdy y'all, I'm Trey Pelletier out of Wichita, Kansas. Former Boeing worker out of Local 839. Just moved up to New York City. Now I work at Roscoe Visions, a small industrial plant that focuses on building detection systems for the MTA buses. And now I'm currently in a smaller union called OPIEU, which is an offshoot of the AFL-CIO. But I am the chair of MRAC, Machinist Reform Action Committee. We are a group that was formed back in 2024 during the Boeing strike in Seattle, where at the time the union leadership was trying to get them to agree to like the first round of contracts, and it took like a bunch of militant workers who were going around organizing, making sure that educating their membership that these contracts are not in the interest of the class. And some of the campaigns that MRAC has really been involved in is the Free Max campaign out in Seattle, Washington, when a brother was arrested after coming back from the Philippines, a union member, and it took a lot of it took a lot of machinists who were out here organizing to help Free Max. But yeah, I'll keep it there.
Thank you, Trey. We'll hear from Matt.
Hi, my name is Matt Scott. I'm a 26-year member of the IBEW in San Francisco, Local 6. The committee to organize the unorganized came out of a group of us that had a history of working together to build class struggle politics inside of the IBEW and solidarity across the building trades and across the labor movement. We were in large part inspired by looking at the strike by the low voltage workers in the IBEW up in Seattle and how that strike was defeated by the complicity of the trade union leadership. And we'd spent a good amount of time looking at why it was defeated in its details and sort of what were the divisions among the workforce of the IBEW and what were the mechanisms both within the labor law and how the IBEW function that prevent us from being the kind of class struggle fighting union that we need to be. So a lot of the things that came out was the way that the union is divided into different units, how the labor leadership has constantly divided us into more and more groups with varying levels of wages and benefits, how those divisions overlap with the racial and national and gender divisions in our society. And so we've built an organization of militants that spans across Northern California. We have members in, I think, about half a dozen locals in Northern California. We're a small organization, but we've come to labor notes because we want to build a fighting opposition within the IBEW across North America. We know that there is an organization called CREW that we have a relationship with that we will let people look into, but we're excited to be a part of this panel.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Elliot.
Hi everyone, I'm Elliot. I'm from Los Angeles Metro. I'm a transit, I'm a train mechanic. The situation, so we have the Committee for One Fighting Transit Union, and the situation at Los Angeles Metro is that we have multiple different unions. I'm in the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 1277. That represents the mechanics. And then the operators, the train and bus drivers are in the sheet metal workers, the SMART. And then the custodians and the parts clerks are in the TCU. And we have transit ambassadors and the Teamsters. So we have the situation of all these different unions, and it mirrors also a lot of the segregation along gender and racial lines in society. And this is a fundamental curse, if you will, of the union situation, of the worker situation in LA Metro. So confronting this, we're thinking of how exactly to step beyond, and there are two main questions that we're faced with. One is how to get power, and the other is how to use it. And so, in the first instance, how to get power is the question of merging these unions together and creating a industrial union of the sort that, all the history you think of the 1930s was these fights of industrial unionism for a reason. But of course, we don't just want, a industrial union with the same kind of leadership that currently exists and doesn't know how to use that power. So, as far as that though, the current leadership very much opposes this merger. So putting this forward in and itself is part of that fight of forging something new, because it exposes that leadership, exposes what they stand for, which is their careers, their benefits, their privileges, and it helps to unite on a whole separate basis, which is what we're trying to do in COFTU. Thank you.
Thank you. And now speak from Will.
Hey, my name is Will. I'm an education worker with the National Education Association in Oregon, and I'm a member of the Class Struggle Action Network and the International Communist Party. The Class Struggle Action Network is a workers' coordination linking together worker militants across over a dozen unions committed to rebuilding a class struggle labor movement. At the base of our unions, we organize solidarity efforts in defense of immigrant workers and against imperialist war. We have workers organize grassroots class struggle formations in their unions, push for inter-union solidarity in defense of picket lines, and grassroots campaigns to push boss-linked leadership towards real strike action on class-wide demands. We believe that workers and employers have nothing in common, and that the workers win gains through leveraging their own collective strike power on an ever greater scale, not through partnerships with the boss, lobbying politicians, or relying on the capitalist state's legal system. Direct experiences with class struggle against the employers is critical for the working class to develop its instinctual solidarity, fighting strength, and sense of its independent interests. For us, strike action is central. The strike is the most powerful weapon the workers possess. We feel we need unions that focus on class demands that can unify all workers. To take up strike action for aggressive wage improvements, not just defensive crumbs. Significant reductions in the working day and in opposition to imperialist war. We must fight all wage differentials within the class based on race, gender, national origin, citizenship status, industry, or seniority. We seek united action among official bodies, rank and file militant formations, and workers' defense organizations, ultimately pushing towards real general strike action, which is necessary if we are to face the Goliath forces of international monopoly capitalism and imperialism. Today, our goal is to contribute towards a formation of a class union united front from below, bringing together grassroots class struggle formations across unions into joint action, strengthening working class independence, solidarity, and the capacity to fight and win outside the halls of the capitalist state and its union legal regulatory apparatus.
Thank you, Will. now that they've all qualified and you're excited to hear what they have to say. Before I ask the first question, I wanted to point out, I mentioned this in the introduction, that many people in this room did participate in labor notes, and many of us know that there are 4,000 to 5,000 people over there, and many of them are looking for answers to their questions. And you could see that if you were there and you went to things like how to break from the Democratic Party, how to break your no strike clause, those were some of the most heavily attended. People are looking for answers, and we feel like it's really unfortunate that Labor Notes doesn't include this perspective, and so we're here to offer that, and we want to engage with those people. So if there's people like that in the room, we hope that you are here on the Zoom, and we hope that you'll ask questions and that you'll offer your perspective also. And I wanted to put that out there because the first question is, what is your critique of Labor Notes based on your prior experience, and or what have you seen or heard during this year's conference? What different approach do you feel is needed to build a fighting workers movement? Each panelist will get 3 minutes this time, and I hope everybody's listening and thinking about what they might want to say or ask. So first, this time we're going to hear from Trey.
Yeah, so this was my first time going to Labor Notes. I think some of the exciting parts about it is, like the brother said, there's thousands of workers here. And there's like this idea that some of them are just all labor leaders, but that's just not the truth. Like a lot of them are just rank and file members who are trying to find a way forward. But my critique of Labor Notes is that it takes a lot of these workers who are excited to find a way forward and then narrows their path on that way forward. And what I mean about this is, like, it does everything they possibly can do to keep them from calling out the labor misleaders who often hold back the working class movement. For example, I brought up the Olin-Winchester strike in Independence, Missouri, and how the union leader from the IAM flew down during their strike and told the workers that they only have to be at the picket line 4 hours a day so they could pick up a second job. Instead of like releasing their strike funds. And the fact is, the IAM would rather spend millions of dollars on stuff like Guide Dogs of America conferences in Las Vegas. And the Labor Notes panelists told me, is like, yeah, that's not great, but like the goal is not just to point up at the leadership, we have to look outside. And it's like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, they hold our strike funds. They literally hold our strike funds. And the suggestion, what they put forward is that we need to create our own strike funds and not actually like try to pressure the leadership and actually rip the leadership from these people who are selling out the working class movement. And so I would say, like, Labor Notes is another way to keep chains on us workers. And so I think the way forward as well is to actually build like a strong anti-imperialist working class movement, especially for us workers in the defense industry, like those workers in Olin-Winchester, or the workers out in Boeing, which I was a former Boeing worker. And yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Trey. Matt, your turn.
Yeah, this is my first time here in Chicago for the big Labor Notes conference, but I've been to two of the smaller regional ones in Oakland and in the San Francisco Bay Area last year and then 3 years ago, and I've taken part, you know, in various Labor Notes workshops over the years. I think that, you know, there's a lot of really useful stuff on the nuts and bolts level of organizing, you know, how you talk to your coworkers, how you do, you know, a campaign with building something around a petition, or how you do X, Y, and Z, but it's the political questions that they refuse to engage in. And I think, like Robbie alluded to, they had this workshop and it was incredibly well attended, and it was talking about building independence politically from the Democrats. But the panelists, when it came down to it, were really, what was their bottom line? We're going to continue to vote for labor-friendly candidates, i.e. Democrats, while we try to do these other things, right? And what are these other things? You know, I think Mondami being a classic example, right? We're gonna run candidates on the party line, but we're actually socialists. We're actually, you know, fighting for the working class. But within the Democratic Party, how does that play out, right? They're in a capitalist organization. They are constantly, I mean, we've already seen it from the first weeks of his administration, reneging on his promises, stabbing workers in the back, endorsing other openly capitalist elements within the Democratic Party in their re-election campaigns. And so the need to build an alternative that is clearly based on the political independence of the working class, both in ideas and in organization. We need to rely on our own forces. We need to be self-funded. And we need to be very clear that the Democrats and the Republicans are enemies of the American working class and the working class of the world. But then the question is, how do we do that, right? We are not going to win the workers simply by proclaiming these truths, right? We need to go into the struggle, and like they talked about at Labor Notes, we have to find the felt needs of our coworkers and find the ways to tackle and address those felt needs. But that's exactly where we will win, because it is the Marxist program, it is class struggle that offers the real way forward in meeting the needs of the masses. And so that's what we've seen. You know, it's not easy work, right? It took us months to establish the program of the committee to organize the unorganized and finding what are the obstacles. And then the next hard part is, how do we concretely overcome those obstacles?
Thank you, Matt. Now from Elliot.
Yeah, I thought, you know, this was also my first labor notes, and it actually was better than I anticipated, I think. Like, there was definitely a lot of decent people out there who are really looking for something, and obviously I did expect it to be a good place to meet up with people and to connect with other, you know, unionists from across the country. And also in some of the panels, I think even panelists, there were a lot of very earnest panelists who were trying really hard to, you know, either better their union or organize in their unorganized workplace, or, you know, I went to a lot of international panels where people are really fighting, you know, in their respective countries. And so, you know, I do think that's very impressive and nice to have that kind of avenue. And then I go from something like that to another panel where people get up and just say, I am the president of this local, and suddenly everybody's clapping. And then, you know, they proceed to go on to a very long monologue about how what's really the problem is that people are not voting, and so Trump gets elected, and, you know, they're not supporting these Democrats, and we should really tell our children that the vote is, you know, a hard-fought thing, and you have to vote no matter what. That was a panel with no discussion. You know, so this kind of connection, so what Labor Notes is doing is, you know, taking these decent people and then taking these basically hardened bureaucrats of you know, these labor unions, and putting them, like, not just even on an equivalent, but those that they are now given the left kind of presentation. Like, so Labor Notes poses itself as being for democracy, being for the left, and so now these hardened bureaucrats kind of get this credit, you know. They get this position that here they are, they're oppositional with, you know, in Labor Notes, while they're actually maintaining the status quo. And for those who, you know, are looking for something, they're now like, okay, these are the official people who have done it, go talk to them, you know, like, and really kind of ties them back, and therefore reinforces the system as it is. And it's not for nothing that, like, a lot of the, like, key questions, like the Democratic Party or US imperialism, like, they were either, like, put into, like, the small kind of offshoot, like, where the left is gonna gather, and so it's very kind of isolated from the general movement, or it was just kind of verboten. It was not something that was talked about or brought up. So that's kind of my general take.
Thank you.
Will?
Yeah, Labor Notes presents itself as a common sense, politically neutral organization focused on the nuts and bolts practical actions workers can take to jumpstart their unions. Yet their events consistently feature Democratic Party politicians as keynote speakers. They maintain links with the AFL-CIO Solidarity Center, which is an arm of U.S. imperialism internationally. In their press, they consistently back symbolic one-day strikes and promoting fake general strikes, such as the so-called economic blackouts that occurred in Minneapolis, which brought small business owners and boss-linked union leaders into joint action with the Democratic Party. They elevate figures such as anti-immigrant Teamster President Sean O'Brien to hero status and give platforms to UAW President Sean Fain, who openly endorsed capitalist trade war tariff regime policies while celebrating U.S. imperialism's military-industrial complex as the quote-unquote arsenal of democracy at last year's Labor Notes. Labor Notes accepts the capitalist state's union legal regulatory regime under Taft-Hartley, which mandates workers recognize employer rights in managing workers workers' labor, and entraps workers' unions into cycles of collective bargaining, restrictive strike action, and the list goes on. This is a tendency we call labor left reformism, and we distinguish it from the class union movement we are fighting for in the Class Struggle Action Network. So how can workers organize differently in the unions? Labor Notes promotes the rank and file reform caucus model as the key organizing engine workers can use to transform their existing unions. We agree workers should organize themselves at the grassroots level around a shared union program to struggle against entrenched leadership. But for us, that program is class unionism, not labor left reformism. Instead of organizing for narrow reformist aims of merely obtaining open bargaining, union democracy, and social movement unionism, we see the need for workers to unite around programs that oppose tying the unions to the capitalist political parties and interclass activist organizations, center the need for aggressive strike action instead of electoral and lobbying strategies, build links with workers across unions to push for unified strike action, and break with conformity to the established labor legal regime. We see a need to center campaigns that advance class-wide demands, such as serious wage increases and reductions of the working day for the most exploited sections of workers, while advocating for mobilizing the unions to wield the weapon of the general strike to oppose the attack on immigrant workers and the deepening imperialist wars spreading across the globe as capitalism slips deeper into its systemic crisis. To get there, we must build a united class union front from below. We must build a class militant pull within the union movement under a clear program by bringing together the existing grassroots formations struggling on a real working class basis, and work to establish this program to put to the working class masses and encourage the wider sections of the unorganized working class to unite and organize around this.
Thank you, Will. Tom.
Yeah, I met scores of very interesting, earnest workers trying to add labor notes. I wish I'd come before to previous ones. This is my first one. I definitely had similar experiences as have been mentioned in workshops, like one where the president of the UFCW Local 7 out in Greeley, Colorado was feted and got the instant applause after she had just completely sold out a strike. And of course the Labor Notes reporter was there, the same reporter who had written a glowing account of the great victory. This victory was recently tried to impose on another workforce, and who rejected it completely, I think in Nebraska or North or South Dakota, and they actually got locked out by the Teamsters a few weeks ago out of their plant. But I was a worker who lived through a Labor Notes inspired reform group that came to power in TW Local 100. It was called New Directions, and they actually they did it a lot by suing their opponents in the union, dragging the union into the courts, into the bosses' courts, and this has become a stock and trade of all the Labor Notes reform caucuses. It goes way back to when Labor Notes, some of their progenitors who founded like the Association for Union Democracy, these were Cold War liberals who welcomed government intervention into the unions, especially the Landrum-Griffin Act. That act was not made so that we could look at the salaries of bureaucrats, like decades later. It was made to put a to put a big stranglehold on the Teamsters Union. There's a huge government vendetta against the power that was congealed in that union through decades of hard class struggle going all the way back to 1934. Now, so I just wanted to mention that because you know that when you join New Directions and you become a Reform Caucus, the first thing they're going to put you in touch with is some lawyers. Some lawyers. There was a recent strike out in New York with the Long Island Railroad workers, and they're under the Railway Labor Act, right? This is an act that they couldn't strike for years. They've been working without a contract. When they finally get a chance to strike, they're almost this close to getting government intervention to stop it, just like the Biden did against the railway workers. But at Labor Notes, you have a workshop that says how we can work with the Railway Labor Act instead of how we can crush the Railway Labor Act and other acts like it. Stop court injunctions. How can we defeat the boss's laws that are meant to keep the working class down? So this is what we need. Labor Notes basically leaves workers in the grips of the Democratic Party and increases the grip of government agencies for the labor movement. And that's why we need a fighting workers movement that can bypass that.
Chantel's gonna bring it home for us.
Yeah, I've had a great time at Labor Notes. This is my second time, and I've been glad to see a lot of the same people and meet a lot of new people. Last time we confronted Sean O'Brien, asked him some very basic questions about the sellouts and the contract, and he ran away and had his security guard, stopping us from getting too close. But I think, the criticism that we have of Labor Notes, it's not that, they're just going about things kind of the wrong way. They have some bad tactics, they're kind of misguided. But it's a question of fundamentally, we have a difference in aims and in goals. As the working class, we live in a society, capitalist society, that is built off of and can only exist insofar as we're exploited. We work basically our whole lives. Probably many of us will never be able to retire. We won't have health care. And we have this tiny parasitic class growing like absurdly wealthy off of our labor. So then what are we doing about that? Should we actually organize for a worker-led country, for a society where we don't have this wages system that's based off of our exploitation? Or should we only fight for sometimes better contracts, and we should talk to our coworkers and fight for contracts like the JBS one that Labor Notes upholds as a shining example? So that is really what our criticism is of Labor Notes. It's the fact that they're trying to restrict our fight to the most small, petty fights for a few more pennies on the dollar, as opposed to organizing ourselves as a class independent of the capitalists, independent of their parties, independent of the misleaders that they have in our unions, who are either clearly working in the interests of the bosses or are literally capitalists themselves. Tom brought up the RLA. Right now, Labor Notes still upholds Sean O'Brien. And there's a lot to say about Sean O'Brien. He's pro-ICE. He says he's best friends with Mark Wayne Mullen. The Teamsters are also the union that are pushing the hardest for the Faster Labor Contracts Act. So now all of, assuming that this goes through, all newly unionized workers are gonna be basically under a law like the RLA. Labor Notes isn't saying anything about this. And that's because, like people have said, Labor Notes is really working to, mislead real working class militancy or repress it once they think that things are getting too out of hand. And we've seen that both in terms of their banning of Colleen, but also how they've set up all of their workshops to stop any real discussion. And you can see it from the moderators. When people start to raise questions of okay, but yeah, we need stronger contracts, we need unions, but what are we doing in this country? We're exploited, we're oppressed. Things are just getting worse and worse with the war in Iran and living conditions for the working class getting worse. How are we gonna fight? And they're no comments, just questions for the panelists. And that's time.
All right, thank you. Big thank you to all the panelists, that was great. And now we're gonna have our first discussion round. We wanna welcome comments from the audience and questions from the audience, especially those of you who attended the Labor Notes conference, and especially those who are independent and not affiliated with any of the groups of the panelists. People who want to speak can raise their hand and I'll recognize them. Also, we have somebody out there with a microphone, they'll come to you. Each of the panelists has chosen some folks that are friendly and prepared if we don't get enough folks who want to ask questions or speak. Please keep your remarks to 2 minutes. We'll have somebody show you when there's time coming. And we're going to take about 5 or so questions, and then we're going to turn it back to the panelists to offer responses and answers. So, who wants to begin? Back to the back.
Yes, my name's Steve Edwards. Sorry I was late to listening to it on the Zoom call. First of all, I just want to thank the organizers for putting this together, and I'm incredibly impressed at the size of the turnout today. I think I've been to 20 Lebanon conferences, and I'd kind of like to have some of that time back. You know, listening to the speakers as we were walking in, one of the panel was, I think, characterizing it so well that what Lebanon does is it attracts people in because it does offer like training in the nuts and bolts in ways that many unions just fail to do. And then they narrow all the goals down to these little tiny things. And I'm speaking as somebody who fought to become president of my local in Ashley in Illinois. I was on the bargaining team of the statewide bargaining team. I got elected. I had to fight to get elected to be on the grievance committee for my agency. 9 years of meeting every month, going through that bureaucratic process, and it wears you down. Because you're literally reduced to fighting for the smallest change. You put weeks of work into fighting to cut somebody's suspension down from 10 days to 8, or whatever that is. And that's the reality of the system, of the labor sort of system that we have in this country. And so by the way, I'm a former member of Socialist Alternative. Sadly, I separated from them because I do not feel that most of the organizations, not just Socialist Alternative, there are far too many organizations on the left that are not getting dug in to working class struggle, taking positions in unions, because you have to, in order to be credible. I'm now
Thank you, brother.
a small group information called Solidarity Now. We didn't know this was happening, and we would have endorsed it if we had. I'll leave it there. But thank you very much for putting this together. This is huge. It's a big deal.
Thank you very much. Anyone else who's not affiliated with any of the groups that do? How about, I saw a hand back here first. Yeah, with the glasses and the brown shirt.
All right, my name is Gavin Wallace. I'm part of the Independent Labor Club of Chicago. I'm sorry, the speaker, who is the only person I can't see actually, mentioned this idea of class independence, which our group is heavily focused on. And I was there at the Independence of the Democratic Party panel. It was very disappointing to see the DSA recruiting there, to see panelists talk about how Democrats are finally letting us endorse them now, and that's the win that we're getting. There was no, I mean, why are we talking about, getting, I don't know, concessions? I feel like we need to talk about how do we get independent from this imperialist war machine? How do we get independent from the Trump regime or the Democratic regime, whoever is in power, and build real, I mean, why aren't we choosing what is built in this country? We're the people who are building it. I think that's the step that we need to take. Get to a real independent movement where we are maybe even independent of the US government entirely. So that's what I'm interested in. And I didn't see anything, or even, I mean, this is the big thing that I heard from a lot of other ILC people, is that there's lots of great tactics at the Labor Notes conference, but there's no analysis at all of where this country is headed, or even like the capitalist system right now, where it's headed. There's no, I heard no mention of the AI bubble, that, SpaceX just IPO'd, and they're cashing out, they fucking cashed out on my 401k, right? And there's no analysis, I didn't hear any analysis at all. I don't know if anyone else did, but yeah.
Thank you. Was there somebody right next to you? Did you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I have more of a question. I think we're at a point and a lot of what I'm hearing at Labor Notes is just like a lot of, you know, like you guys said, nuts and bolts, but no actual political analysis, and no like discussion of like moving beyond like the tactics that have been so unsuccessfully being like that are being employed right now, and I think like in my opinion, I think like we need to have a discussion about like, you know, anarchist strategy versus communist strategy, but also like beginning to unite like all of these, all of our unions or all of our, even like the tenant movement. I'm in the tenant movement, so into like one single party, one single organization that kind of has like one sort of like single aim, and we need to decide like what those aims are, and like what our goals are for the working class, and then we need to like pursue it, and we need to pursue it independent of like all these democratic like elections and the DSA and, you know, all these things. Like I think we need to like, these people are violent, and like the government, the US government is inherently like designed to uphold the bourgeois class and their interests. And so we can't be like going that way. We can't be like doing any of these other things. Even like we can't be doing a lot of like the what is it called, the unionism. Like we need to like, I think we need to create a political party, or not a political party, an organization like the Communist Party. But I guess I'm just curious, like, how do we do that? And I don't know if like panelists have answers or people in the audience.
That's great.
Free to answer.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're going to take two more, and then there will be another chance for some more audience participation. So let's get the person in the back there first.
Is this thing on? Okay. Hi, Sean from New York City District Council of Carpenters, and also ILC New York City. I had the great fortune to know some of the people on the panel. Some of them are drinking buddies. There's other people here who work in local bars in my neighborhood in New York. There is an incredible network here, it seems. People that I saw at Labor Notes who had kind of the right ideas were marginal, and I really appreciate that this is a demarginalization process of this class struggle network here. And we all get to see what you guys are doing as a counterpoint to, I think, what we all recognize rightfully as the reformist leftist bullshit that we're seeing in Labor Notes. So thank you for that, first off. But I have a question about your organization, because I know several people on the panel, I know people involved, and I'm interested in the nuts and bolts of what the Class Struggle Action Network does, how people get plugged into it, how it seeks to mobilize people across industries, unions, and political differences, because I know that those two exist. So I would like to know more about your organization so that we can, spread the word and talk about it, because I think it's very exciting.
Thank you. Up in front, we got one last one, and then we're going to go to the panelists, and then there will be another chance. So right up front.
Yeah, well, one of the things.
Wait for the microphone. Wait for the microphone.
Okay, so my name is Steve Zeltzer. I'm with the United Front Committee for the Labor Party. I'm a member of the CWA News Guild. So one of the things that the conference did not talk about is fascism and the rise of fascism in this country. And the reason is it means fighting the bureaucracy, who doesn't want to mobilize against fascism. And as everyone knows, they're trying to redistrict and exclude black representation in the South. That's a direct attack on the working class. And it's something that the labor movement needs to mobilize nationally against. The union bureaucracy is afraid of mobilizing workers. There are no mass worker demonstrations they want to call. So what we are going to be supporting is a national action by the working class and all unions against the attack on black representation, black workers in the South. That's something we can get traction on in our unions. And important politically, because the black working class is a key force in the American working class. And these black workers now are under direct attack, racist attack by these fascists and Nazis. So that's something I think this coalition should think about doing. Organizing a campaign to demand that there be a national action, protest against the attack on black representation. The other thing is the question of a workers' party, because there are a number of groups here who are running candidates. We're supporting Shama Sawant, but we need a united front of independent working class candidates that link together so we have a poll in the working class of that perspective of the need for working class candidates against the Democrats and Republicans. So we would urge those groups that are running candidates to start working together and collaborating with their candidates, go to national conventions of their unions and say we need a working class political alternative. We need a workers' party in this country. There's a political vacuum. So that's something I think the groups here should start discussing, how they can work together with working class candidates to build a workers' party in the United States.
Thank you, Steve. All right. Thank you for all those comments and questions. And now we're going to offer any panelists who would like to respond a chance to respond. I'm going to go out on a limb and say all of you do. So can we just start on the right and we'll work our way down?
Yeah, well, I'd say the future. Oh, is this thing on? Hold on. Can you hear me? Check.
Hold on a second.
Hello?
Thanks for sound now.
Yeah, give it up for the sound. And everybody who's volunteering to put this on. Thank you.
Yeah, so the future, where is capitalism going? And I think the answer is inter-imperialist war. We're in a massive late stage of an overproduction crisis across the global economy. We have monopoly capitalism at such an advanced degree that it's gobbling up every crumb that it can, and it's even forcing the capitalist state to attack its own labor aristocracy here in the United States and shred the union protections through the NLRB of state workers and so on and so on. So I think what we're seeing is a capitalist system that's decaying, that's eating itself, and the war, military-industrial complex, is one of the most profitable sectors of investment right now, and we see a mass rearmament of the capitalist states across the world preparing for war between the United States and China. And if you're plugged into the news and the economic situation, you see that's happening on all levels with the investments, with the CHIPS Acts, the SHIPS Acts. It's all there to prepare for the next war. So I believe it was Lenin who said that fascism is imperialism dressed in preparing itself for war. And I think that's where we're at, that bourgeois democracy is not an alternative, but we know from World War I to World War II was the Democratic Party, along with the opportunist leaders who rallied the working class around the defense of the nation and the defense of democracy. How many wars have been waged in defense of democracy against authoritarianism? We have to be ready for those lies and trickeries because the next war will be launched against a supposedly communist state. So I think that as communists in the labor unions, we have to be ready for the next Red Scare. That was talked about a lot in the last election cycle, the threat of communism. And so I think that rhetoric is there, it's being prepared, and we have to be ready to build a class union united front from below, and we have to be building towards serious general strike action so that we can put the brakes on this imperialist war drive. That's the only leverage that we have as a working class to do that. We need a class political party. For me, that's the International Communist Party. But we have to be in the trenches. We have to be pushing for this organization, and we have to see the labor left and its harmony with the petty bourgeois. And it's organizing with the small capitalists against monopoly capitalism in order to stay alive for themselves. And that's what the American working class has been hit over and over again with the left-right punch of the Democrats and Republicans. And it's time that we break from that, and we break from the petty bourgeois, project that was, the foundation of this state of America and the Democratic Party, and move towards this class union movement, but then further beyond that, a revolution for communism to liberate humanity from the shackles of this rotten capitalist system, and that has to be organized on an international revolutionary through International Revolutionary Party.
I'm going to take it much closer to the ground. I went into labor notes and spent most of my time in building trades related meetings. And I found in those meetings it was actually pretty open to discussion. And there was, the traveled around the room and I was able to speak 2 or 3 times in many of these things. And the focus for me at Labor Notes was really to say, what are the felt needs that we face on the job? Right? What are the real like day-to-day struggles of working people? And how can we address those in a way that points us towards the necessity of a break with the Democratic Party? How can we address those in a way that challenges the existing bureaucracy and its obedience to the anti-labor laws and its perspective of labor management cooperation? Because you know, the American working class is moving to the right. It is not moving to the left. We are not heading into a revolutionary situation in the immediate future. We're facing a period of needing to defend ourselves against an onslaught of attacks. So how are we going to build the unity of the working class in its defense in this period where most workers are trying to keep their heads down and are just looking out for themselves and their families, right? How do we cut against the individualism and the fear among the working class? We have to look for when they are ready to fight, and then take that fight and be able to lead it in such a way that it actually cuts against the divisions which are myriad among the working class. And so, you know, a classic example of that in these discussions was you stand up for the contract on the job, or safety, construction discussions, constant issues about the safety on the job and the disregard for it. We in our committee take a position against the right of the employers to just arbitrarily lay off workers and to arbitrarily refuse people that come out from the union hall. And we talk about that in a way that ties together the fight to defend women and blacks and other minorities on the job from discriminatory layoffs with the same mechanisms are used to weed out militants. You can say to the white male 3rd generation construction unionist that he has the same fight as the black and female workers on the job around these kind of issues.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, I thought that was well said. You know, actually, so there's a lot of points here in calling for like a workers' party, I think, and breaking with the Democrats. If people get a chance to look at the kind of slogans, the main points of unity, as you will, of the Committee for One Fighting Transit Union, it doesn't actually say that. So what it does have in terms of the Democrats is no support, no money from the union to the Democrats or the Republican parties of the bosses. And you know, the Committee for One Fighting Transit Union is intended to be a broad organization, to be able to bring in people who may support Democrats, who may support Trump. In fact, we do have people who are members who have supported Trump. And but to also use the opportunity to show, because the fact is that both the Democrats and the Republicans stand opposed to the interests of the working class. So the point is to try and show through the actual actions that we are doing and what we need to do that this is an obstacle and that we need to fight for an independent political organization. And so, you know, in talking about the money, for example, the money that goes, that's very concrete. And so, you know, when I was, much of this is going to be discussed in the next question, but, you know, trying to run for a position in the executive board, this discussion is coming up a lot, and the fact that, you know, almost every local meeting I go to is another like $2,500 to this politician or that politician. Well, at the same time, we have meager strike funds to be able to actually put ourselves on something. That is actually very concrete to show how this is a roadblock, how this is actually not helping. And then, these Democrats, the ones that our leadership pushes for are the ones that reform pensions so that we now have a two-tier pension system. Like that was, Jerry Brown, governor of California. That's kind of the concrete way to try and show and try and bring along workers to this understanding, because where it's going to lie, the power of the understanding of a general understanding of the world of class dynamics, the power of it is that it actually speaks to workers, because it's actually their understanding, whether they can kind of explain it or conceptualize it. It's like, okay, what I want, food on the table, I want a house, I want to be, to be comfortable and survive, and being able to show, what are in the way of all of these. And of course, the bureaucracy is constantly pushing the Democrats in blue California, and it's like, so they are actually pushing something that is coming and harming our general, our own position. And so that's kind of what we're hoping, both in terms of the union as a whole and within COFTU.
Thank you.
So, people, I think, especially the first few comments, talked about how there's zero analysis or any real discussion of political questions at labor notes. And someone brought up the AI bubble, and I know, one of our comrades went to a panel on the AI and data centers and said, there's a bubble and it's going to burst. And the panelist said, no, it's a booming industry. Like, there's no bubble that's gonna pop. I think it was someone from IBEW who was saying, and it's so great because our workers are gonna be working on these data centers. But yeah, I think, we're here, from different organizations and in the room to fight to advance the working class movement. We have to unite on certain, principles and programs of how do we advance these day-to-day struggles. But as we do that, it's essential that we have very lively political debate and discussion and ideological struggle over the way forward, because our task is quite large. We have we're up against a lot, the most powerful ruling capitalist imperialist class in the world, very entrenched, U.S. chauvinist ideology amongst the U.S. working class, and a very low level of struggle in this country right now. When we look at where different points of struggle have been in our country, I think Tom brought up the 34 strike, or talking about how the Communist Party really played a leading role in the working class movement in the 20s and 30s, even the strikes that we saw in the 70s and 80s. And I think this point of the need to have political discussion and debate and disagreement is so important, because without that, we're never going to be able to advance very far. So we need to study history. What are the lessons? What are the successes and the defeats? How do we not repeat these? And Labor Notes does not want us to talk about that at all. So that's why, in Teamsters Mobilize, we've been doing a book club, and that is open actually for other union militants to join if people are interested. Within Maoist Communist Union, we're also going to be doing a study of Marxist approach to work in the unions. And I think I think Steve brought up, kind of what's going on with the rise of fascism. We need to closely study what are the different divides amongst the US ruling class. What are we seeing with the rise of ICE and more openly terroristic, fascistic methods of class rule, with the rise of surveillance. And there is mass opposition to this in the country. It's true we're not in a revolutionary situation. I agree with that. I don't think that's on the horizon in the short term. But I do think more and more people in the working class and more broadly amongst the masses are fed up. I mean, the situation for us is getting worse. So we need to figure out how to lead that mass discontent and anger.
Thank you. Great.
So I wanted to kind of touch on some of the points that have already been brought up, especially with the fact that we're not really seeing any critique of some of these labor misleaders at Labor Notes, and why are we not seeing any break from the capitalist system? And I would say because labor notes and these leaders of labor are also all connected, like you have TDU that is closely connected to labor notes, and then you have Sean Fain that was already mentioned, came and spoke at labor notes, and you don't see any sort of criticism of these people. And like there's a massive organizing drive right now in the South, or there should be a massive organizing drive in the South of UAW workers who are trying to organize for the first time, and like the Mercedes plants or the Toyota plants or the Subaru plants up in Indiana. And some of these places only have like one staffer for like 50,000 workers who are trying to create a union for the first time. And it's really holding back the working class movement. And I think there needs to be massive continuous exposures of who these leaders are and how they are stopping us from actually organizing workers for the very first time. And then like, yeah, and then to some of the points of combating fascism, that was something that was very noticeable during labor notes. There wasn't one panel on like the rise of fascism. And like, this is something that we really do need to take serious, especially that we're entering an imperialist war right now with Iran that's been waging on for the last couple months. And the fact that is that the ruling class is going to continue to try to crack down on workers, and that labor notes and these union leaders are going to collaborate together to try to help these speed ups happen. But I'll end it there. Thank you, Trey.
Yeah, we don't really know what's going to happen in the next weeks or months, but we do know it's plenty bad right now. It's incredibly bad, and there's war after war after war. And what we in the Transit Workers Union are trying to do is talk to our coworkers about the need not to sink into just like individualistic dog eat dog existence, to let the collective fall away. We know that the bottom could drop out of the economy at any moment, and when it does, that might mean mass unemployment, which could lead to a lot of divisions, a lot of tensions. But we're talking to coworkers about like how the Iran war is accelerating the downfall of U.S. imperialism, but also how the massive inflation, the constant ICE attacks, the ramping up of police repression, increasing racist cop terror, how it's affecting, how it's connected to our own existence on the job, and why we have to combine and take into account all the struggles, our own economic struggles, and connect and with the broader struggle of the working class to defend the oppressed. I know that's a little abstract, but that's we have had some success, but it's true that there haven't been massive workers coming out to these protests against the Iran war. I was recently in Cuba, and I've been talking to my coworkers in transit. We have a lot of workers from the Caribbean, and they definitely feel, and Nicolas Maduro is actually imprisoned only a few miles from where I work, and people really feel that level of repression is a naked attack on their own existence, especially their families back at home, what U.S. imperialism can do to places. So that's one thing. I didn't want to say like, people need to be, the left in this country, we've been, completely in a sectarian sterility for so long. What's important, we all have profound political differences and but we do need to overcome that and fight in United Fronts for common aims. Otherwise, that's all it's going to be, sectarian sterility. We can do this on in the workplace, but take up common fight against ICE terror and other issues, and this is extremely important. What we're doing today, also the fight to rebuild the workers' movement.
Zoom call, we have a very active chat, so I just want to let you know we have almost 15 questions in the chat so far, so maybe at some point we could read some of them out. I just wanted to let you all know an update on that.
Okay, great. Great. Well, now's the time we were going to move to the second focused question. So maybe after that, we'll take some questions from the Zoom chat. The second focused question for our panelists is, what is your group doing to build a fighting workers movement? And besides successes, what problems and obstacles have you encountered? Alongside trade union or industry-specific issues, what other political issues are you focused on? Each panelist is going to have 5 minutes, and I'm going to ask you, like many of us, I was out late last night, and I had a gigantic coffee right when we started this, so I'm going to excuse myself. And Elliot, if I happen to go over, will you pay attention to the timer, and I'll be right back.
Just make it harder on me. Yeah, so I think getting into the concrete is also a helpful way to answer some of the questions that were raised earlier, because I do think they were kind of getting into the concretes of how we're trying to forge a fighting workers movement. So, you know, in COP2, one of the things that faced us directly very recently was, you know, the attack on immigrants. Obviously, Los Angeles is a very heavily Latino town, very immigrant town. And it was the start of the surge last summer. So at that case, it's like, you know, just asking to let's all close ICE, end ICE, ban ICE, whatever, end ICE, was not a particularly popular line in the industry. I would say that even though it's majority Latino and a lot of immigrants, even the immigrants, a lot of them defended what was going on and was like, oh, this is really sad, but you know, you've got to follow the rules. And so, you know, the first thing that happened was there were two bus operators, Sean and Jaime, who went in the public media and said that they would not allow ICE onto their buses. And then they were fired. And so that kind of created a situation where at least it's driving it much closer to home, I think, for coworkers. If this is somebody that you know that is now being fired for taking what should be a decent stand, in fact, for safety, these, you know, ICE agents are not only kidnapping people, but they're fully armed, and who knows what the hell's gonna happen. So, you know, that kind of defense was a way of bringing the issue to the rest of the workforce about how the need to stand up to immigrants is actually directly related to your situation on the job, whether you be Latino or immigrant or white or whatever, just because you stood up as a First Amendment right and spoke, and now these people are fired. And that's kind of bled into now the situation where commercial driver's license, Trump said that, you know, that anybody who is lower than a green card will lose their commercial driver's license, and California with Newsom and the Democrats have complied with this. And that means hundreds of operators at LA Metro, part of, you know, hundreds of thousands of commercial driver's license holders throughout the country. And so we're trying to make a deal of this. This is something that the same people who were excusing ICE are like saying that this is terrible because these are their coworkers who are being pushed down. And it also, like, actually in both these cases, I should say, exposes the current leadership of the unions, because they refused. We had to pull them, dragging, you know, kicking and screaming as far as defense of Sean Jaime, and as far as the union divide, like, my union was not doing any of it. And now with the commercial driver license situation, it's very similar, like getting defense of these very operators. So, you know, that is something that we're trying to gain traction on and push on. And, you know, the operators union, for example, these people are pushed out of that union into the Teamsters for a much lower paid job, separate job, and they have to restart their seniority, and they're told to pay both dues. So, you know, it very much exposes the situation of the current leadership. And another thing, you know, as far as what we're doing is, I ran for member at large, and which is on the executive board, under the slogan, okay, to defend each member, defend the union. And did not win that, but actually part of the purpose to get into is kind of the obstacles to the winning. And the biggest thing is craft mentality among my union, the ATU. And you know, this, I think in this moment where people are feeling like defensive, they're feeling like, you know, things are coming after, they tend to, like Tom had mentioned, to kind of just turn inward, and it's like it's a dog eat dog, so you have to defend yourself. So they rely on kind of the typical pillars: craft, race, gender, you know, all these kind of support networks that are basically built into the capitalist society that we're in. And so that is very much heightened as, you know, as well as, you know, so kind of trying to show that in fact that is harming your situation, and we need, you know, the collective power that comes with the operators and everyone else at Metro.
Thank you. Will go next.
Yeah, so I'll just talk a little bit about some of the work that we've done in the Class Struggle Action Network. So we were formed in 2022 in the Pacific Northwest amid the strike waves of that year, which witnessed IAM, Weyerhaeuser, lumber workers, Portland City workers, Starbucks workers, and others going out on strike. Our initial work focused primarily on mobilizing workers we were in contact with across unions for picket line solidarity throughout the region, and organizing various informational events discussing labor history and class unionism. And through that work, we started doing base building around our vision of what class unions are and what the union movement should be. And through building those interconnections with workers across different unions, we were able to kind of launch the network and move into build our power base up, build our influence within the working class and across different unions. So during the Weyerhaeuser IAM strike, we built solidarity ties with militant picket captains in Longview, Washington, assisting them with boots on the ground solidarity to defend the picket line. And after the strike, we helped them organize a rank and file group called Lumber Workers United, which worked to push out BossLink leadership in the local had sabotaged the 2022 strike. In Portland, members of our organizing committee were central in organizing the rank and file group Class Struggle Baristas, which organized a regional campaign to fight the no strike clause being inserted in the SBWU contract by opportunist leadership. Class Struggle Baristas also built wall-to-wall support for their group in one of the busiest Starbucks stores in the city while organizing a real shop local from the bottom up. UFCW Fred Meyer workers in CSAM organized a class struggle group called the United for Class-Wide Action. UFCWA brought together workers across Fred Meyer stores to organize shop floor actions against BossLink leadership and employer collaboration, which resulted in serious workplace condition improvements in one store. In the lead up to the UFCW 555 Fred Meyer contract bargain, workers organized an aggressive campaign to push leadership towards a $40 an hour wage demand. So it's like showing up to the opportunist union leadership meetings, which they, you know, don't really invite the workers to. Nobody ever shows up to, and organizing base to come out to these things and rally and push these demands to leadership. And ultimately, that forced the leadership to move from pitted wage increases during the contract bargain at $30 an hour demands, which ultimately contributed to a situation where the union leadership was pushed into having to take strike action or being completely discredited by the union rank and file. These workers, alongside the Class Struggle Baristas and workers from the New Seasons Labor Union in Portland, worked together to build a grassroots service industry coordination that assisted with inter-union picket line solidarity across numerous strikes. We've also assisted workers in IBEW in establishing grassroots campaigns to push back against discriminatory action against female workers using the tools of archaic conservative craft unionism. As the imperialist war in Gaza began, the network was activated to push solidarity resolutions with Palestinian workers across numerous union locals. Workers affiliated with CSAM were the first to pass solidarity resolutions in the AFL Thurston Lewis Mason Central Labor Council, unanimously passing one resolution that was later shot down by national AFL BossLink leadership. The public controversy surrounding the incident led to many other resolutions being passed around the country. We have likewise passed resolutions in numerous unions in solidarity with immigrant workers. We participate in the Labor Committee to Defend Immigrants in Portland alongside workers from numerous other unions, where the group organizes workplace trainings to assist rank and file workers in organizing to defend their immigrant coworkers on the shop floor. Likewise, we've organized campaigns of solidarity with combative unions internationally with a focus on the Sikh workers' struggle in Turkey, as we see these unions as operating on a class unionist basis, defending the most exploited section of workers in that country whose linen products are in turn sold across the U.S. retailers. As the masses of workers remain unorganized over the years, we've also helped unorganized workers in taking the next steps in forming unions in their workplaces, in a few instances. From our experience within the labor movement, the forces of the labor left reformism have continued to grow influence within the regime union leadership in recent years. These so-called rank and file reform groups tend to work hard to ensure that class struggle perspectives are marginalized and pushed to the side within their own efforts. They get out in front of the class and set up these groups, and then they carefully corral them onto the path of class collaboration. The influence of the Democratic Party, its various appendages, such as groups like Labor Notes, work to get out ahead of these spontaneous movements. And so this is why over the past few months, members of the Class Struggle Action Network worked to activate our pre-existing relationships with some of the groups here in this panel to call for the organization of this event as one of our efforts towards building that united front below. So that's a part of our work and what we're doing and some of the challenges that we see.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're jumping around a little, so we're gonna have Tom go next.
Yeah, I want to address something that was raised at the Labor Notes conference, but it's very important, the need to fight to win over MAGA workers, the need to fight. And everyone who's been in the working class on a day-to-day basis knows that Democratic Party liberalism has about as much attraction as, a skunk. And you're not going to win over anybody on it. And it's seen as, because the liberalism has divided everyone into a sector, and if you fight for one sector, someone's got to lose, right? Now, I ran for executive board about a year ago, and of course, I think I told you I'm proud to have fought for a program for Black liberation, down with witch-hunts against migrants and refugees. But understandably, a lot of my coworkers, especially Black coworkers, say, Tom, you're going to fight for Black liberation, right? What does that really mean? And we have to go out and tell them what it really means. And what it means, what I'm getting to, is that we have to fight for the liberation of all the oppressed, but show in concrete ways how that's going to help everybody. So we said racial oppression is used to drive down wages and work conditions for all workers, including white union members. Join us in the fight to end plantation justice. More recently, we had to address in the Long Island Railroad strike. Long Island Railroad is historically predominantly white workers on Long Island, whereas our workforce is heavily, predominantly Black, immigrant, and minority. And the MTA has used that division to pay us much less money and to treat us much worse in certain circumstances. So when we were on those picket lines and talking to Long Island Railroad workers, we explained how the MTA is pitting both of our workforces against each other, and how it's in the interest of Long Island Railroad workers to fight, instead of having a substandard class, which is dragging down everybody, for everyone to fight for genuine parity in pay, benefits, and protections for both and all workforces at the highest levels. This speaks to the felt needs of the entire working class and does not fall into the pitfall of Democratic Party liberalism. We all know that one of the most, that there is a felt need for a fighting workers' party in this country, if it was ever raised and truly addressed, one that's separate from both Democrats and Republicans. We also fought for, we put on a leaflet around the time when the crackdown was going on at Columbia University. We wanted to address coworkers why they should defend radical students who are fighting for Palestinian rights. And we had, we tried to do it in a convincing way. We said, why trans workers should defend Palestine activists. And we tried to convince them how our interests are in fighting for free Palestine, but also how an attack on the Columbia students and the Columbia Students Union, which is very, very much connected with the fight for free Palestine, there was the prelude to an attack on the other workforce, including the trans workers who are organized by my union. Another thing we do is fight for workers in this period. It's especially important to take up fights for workers who've been victimized, who are being thrown off the job. And this was a case of a train operator who was just grotesquely set up and fired. And this is a way of also uniting your workforce. He didn't get his job back, but we had to go on a campaign footing to show workers why the story that the boss is told. Actually, he was involved in a train wreck and it was the boss driving the train, but he got fired and the boss got scot-free. And right now, we're deep into a contract fight, which before the Long Island Railroad workers went out, we talked about the need to unite all transit workers, and sort of along the lines I was just talking about, the racial divisions. But and this dovetails with the fight for industrial unionism. We really should be, if you don't unite an industrial union, at the very least you should have common expiration dates, and you should be fighting for industrial action across different trades and different sectors. So this is one of our more popular leaflets, which we were actually able to get to quite a few Long Island Railroad workers. We think it put a certain amount of pressure on their bureaucrats, on their leaders. And so yeah, these are the kinds of things that we're doing, and we're trying to there's going to be many struggles ahead. What's more important is to be politically prepared to intervene when you can to bring those struggles forward in a concrete way.
Thank you, John. Oh, yes. Sorry, Chantel.
So right now, Teamsters Mobilize is, Teamsters Mobilize is made up of a lot of fighting militants from across industries, mostly UPS, but with many people who are stewards and who've been in the union, some for like over 30 years. Right now we're working to organize a national contract enforcement campaign. We talk about the need to, of course we need to fight around the contracts, but then the bosses violate them all the time, and the union leaders let that happen. So right now we're working to try to synthesize basically what are all the experiences that we have within Teamsters Mobilize in fighting to enforce the contract, and then in fighting against the retaliation that comes from that. One of our members, Jess, she can give a wave, she's here, a steering committee member of TM, and she's a steward and has been for 6 years, I think. And then she was recently terminated. She now has her job back, but terminated for defending a member who had a gallon of antifreeze thrown at him by the supervisor, which is absurd. And this is something that's, very common, stewards or others being terminated from their jobs for fighting against harassment from the boss and against speed-ups. And one thing right now that's really important within, UPS in particular, but it's certainly across the logistics industry, but is against the layoffs. Right now, under this UPS contract, I think at least 60,000 people have been laid off. And there's tens of thousands of more workers who are going to lose their jobs. And the union says there's absolutely nothing that can be done about it. They set it up this way with the contract. So members are fighting these layoffs, are fighting to keep the work, are fighting against speed-ups. And we want to bring together all this experience, both to increase the militancy within TM members, but to put that out there and reach Teamsters across the country and workers across the country to say that we can fight. And we shouldn't be beaten down by the bosses and then the union leaders who basically say, oh, there's nothing we can do. This is kind of it. Yeah, it kind of sucks, but that's the situation. And we need to use the union mechanisms as they exist, but we cannot be limited by them. Anyone who's ever gone through the grievance process knows how backwards it is and how much it's set up to squash any real struggle and certainly any collective fight. But we can't just be like, oh, we're not going to file grievances then. We need to organize amongst our coworkers to take on these fights, but then also to transform the unions altogether. And we're preparing for the 2028 UPS contract as well. That's coming up, and we need to organize so that we're actually prepared to strike this time, as opposed to just do the strike thread, and then the bosses will give, meet all your demands, which clearly didn't happen. Another aspect of Teamsters Mobilizes work is to produce a lot of stuff for Instagram, social media, and for the blog. There's a thing on TM's website called the Militants Journal, where both members of the Teamsters, but also union militants across the union movement can write and share their experiences and fights that they've waged. There's a number of people here who have written things for that. And we think that this is really important because we were talking about in the previous questions, there's all these issues in our society and there's no working class analysis of them, really. I mean, obviously there's the capitalist analysis, and then there's the liberal analysis, which says it's the working class analysis that we can see on whatever Democracy Now! Or at Labor Notes. But in TM, we think it's very important that we put out a lot of videos to make exposures of all the outrages in our society of the economic issues that people are facing across the country, all these sellout contracts, strikes being crushed by union leaders in collaboration with the bosses in the state, and to speak about, of course, these economic issues, but political ones as well. And I think everyone here has spoken about the need for us as a class to be organizing against ICE, to be organizing against Zionism and the US state support for the genocide of Palestinians, and against the Iran war, and to see this as an imperialist war. There's a question about the challenges, and I would say one of the main challenges we face is that we know we are going against the tide. We are a minority within the class in terms of the fight that we're waging. I mean, we can see within Labor Notes, them banning members and trying to squash any real discussion. And it can be easy to feel, mentally kind of beaten down by that, but I think it's essential that we know we're fighting for the interests of our class and maintain our confidence.
Thank you. Our last panelist is Trig, and then we're going to go back to some audience participation, audience discussion.
So one of the main focuses of MRAC right now is a real necessity to grow as an organization. Some of the challenges that we've had is the reality is that there's been not a lot of reform action within the IM for a very long time. I would imagine a lot of that is due to we are in the defense sector, and the people who tend to be drawn to defense work or these type of jobs come from a little bit more conservative leaning. And then a lot of people on the left kind of shame workers who are forced into these jobs. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is break from that mentality and really wage a real militant struggle within the working class movement. For example, some of the key things that we're trying to do is align Boeing contracts across the IM, because, for example, back in 2023, I went on strike, and it was 8,000 of us workers, and then in 2024, it was another strike, it was 33,000 workers in Seattle. And then in 2025, there was another Boeing strike that happened out in St. Louis, Missouri, and there was another 3,000 workers. And during these strikes, I would say during our strike, we got some okay demands met, and during the Seattle strike, they got some okay demands, and then during the St. Louis strike, I think we can call it a defeat. Even with our workers, even with some of us who were passing resolutions at our local hall, at my local hall, we first passed a resolution through MRAC for $1,600, and then our business rep bumped it up because obviously he didn't want us to get all the credit for it. But we got $3,200 that we were able to send to the St. Louis workers. And then after that, the Boeing workers out in Seattle sent $33,000 to the workers in St. Louis. And like all that's really exciting, that we're showing all the solidarity amongst our coworkers, our fellow Boeing workers, because we're all fighting the same fight. But ultimately, that's not really as much power as we could have had if we could have had the 33,000 workers in Boeing going on strike, if we could have had the 8,000 workers in Wichita going on strike, and if we could have had those 3,000 workers in Seattle going on strike. So those are some of the main focuses that we're focusing on. Some other key things that we're trying to focus on is like building up of young machinist committees. Through the one in Wichita, we were able to show many labor films such as Harlan County, USA, American Dream, and point to some of the strengths of those heroic struggles waged by the working class, and then some of the failures. And these were great educational moments for our union members. And then there's some districts like in 751 where it's one of the largest districts, and the IAM's trying to say that it really wants to push young workers to take up leadership. But one of the largest districts doesn't even have a young machinist committee at all. And so like that's something that a lot of folks in MRAC have been doing, have been trying to create petitions to try to give these young workers who are coming in with a militant mindset a voice to speak in their union and to have some sort of control of their ability to wage a struggle in their union. And some of the other efforts that we've been very active in is trying to pass anti-ICE resolution and did a lot of ICE activism as well. And so I tried to pass the ICE resolution, got some boos from some of my coworkers, but ultimately what it did is my union president backed me up and he said, hey, anybody can bring up any political topic in our union hall. And so that was like a great opening for us. And so like now we have a local that is much more lively and where we're able to bring these political discussions to the floor. And so that's some of the goals that we're trying to do. And then obviously trying to protect against a lot of retaliation that happens, especially that we're in the defense industry and we are trying to speak out against this imperialist war that is being waged by the United States. And so, yeah, I'll wrap it up there.
Great. My apologies, I said that was the last panelist, but I overlooked my own union brother. I'm fortunate enough to get to hear Matt speak all the time. I would hate to deny you all that opportunity, so our last panelist here is going to be Matt.
Thank you, brother. You know, the committee to organize the unorganized in the IBEW, we're in Northern California. We've got 7 separate locals of the IBEW that touch the Bay Area. We've got another local up in Sacramento. We've got additional local in Fresno to the east of us. And there's a lot of division just on the basis of what local you come from, right? And so the way our hiring halls work, the local hand gets the preference at a job first, and then if you're from a different local, you're in a separate second list. And a lot of the people that are on the first list live next door to the people that live on the second list. And it's just a level of absurdity that this is the basis for division. And we saw it come out in a particularly ugly way. Unlike much of the country that's been in a massive construction boom, San Francisco was in a recession, basically from the time of COVID until the beginning of this year. We had large levels of unemployment throughout that period. It ebbed and waned, but our contractors came and made us reopen the contract in San Francisco. And they basically took away part of our scheduled raise. And our union leadership went along with it and then extended the contract even longer. And basically we're explicit. My job as the head of your union is to preserve friendly relations with the employers. And they played on the fears that were very real. This was happening basically a year ago in a month. So it's like the beginning of the Trump regime, it's the tariffs. People are very afraid for the future. But the other element that came into it was there was a big push in the context of this to pit us against the brothers from the other locals. That the real problem was, if we could just get rid of all these travelers, then we'd all be working. And it very much mirrors the mindset of the nativist, anti-immigrant propaganda in this country. And so we put out a leaflet and we titled it basically not locals against travelers, but workers against the bosses. And not only did we oppose just the reopening of the contract, but put it in the context of what is it going to take for us to be united and actually take on the people that are trying to take away our ratings. We also were able to put forward a motion on defense of immigrants. And in the IBEW, there's various organizations, some more official, some less official, that have been pushing immigrant solidarity resolutions that are basically a set of nice words. And it's something that's a good thing. It's good to see locals taking a stand. We're against the attacks against immigrants, so on and so forth. We should all be in solidarity. But what we tried to do is make it actually concrete and tie defense of immigrants, opposition to the deportations, with the fight to organize the unorganized, right? We basically said we want this to become an integral part of the locals' attempts to unionize non-union contractors. We want our organizers to be out on the job saying, we want you to be in the union, we want you to be fighting for better wages and conditions with us, and we're going to defend you if you get attacked by ICE, right? And so the union leadership was very much against this, right? They're all happy all across liberal locals in the Bay Area, multiple of them with the assistance of the leadership passed these ones that were just words. But the minute you ask them to do something, oh, well, what about this? What about that? We can't, and then they start appealing to the right-wing anti-immigrant sentiments. Well, the black market and the wages and so we were able to then counter that because there is a concrete case of an IBEW member that's facing deportation. And so we've actually mobilized the membership around that issue, and where I'm gonna wrap it up really quick. When it's a brother that you know, it suddenly becomes a different issue. And so we've been able to build on that. I'll hopefully talk about that more later.
Thank you, Matt. Now we are going to return to the audience, but we're going to deviate slightly from what the plan was because we kind of overlooked the fact that there would be a very active Zoom contingent watching and participating on the Zoom. So what I think we'd like to do now is take maybe 3 or 4 questions from the audience here, and then we're going to turn to the online moderators, and they're going to kind of summarize and read some questions from the Zoom chat. And we're going to do all of that, the comments and questions, and then we're going to turn around and have the panel do a wrap up based on that and anything else that they'd like to wrap up. So for the audience part, and we did have y'all, I don't know if y'all actually had people prepared to say something. If those people are really excited and you really need them to say something that you think you missed, then we can talk about that. But otherwise, I would like to encourage folks, again, who are not affiliated to throw their perspectives in here. So we'll start on this side of the room and we'll go that way. So way in the back, standing up.
Just a second. Just 1 second.
Yeah, so my name's Luke.
Can you give us 1 second to get the sound on the side? Yeah. Go for it.
Okay. My name's Luke. I'm coming down here from Madison. I'm a former Amazon worker at KCBG in Northern Kentucky. I'm also a member of Solidarity Now and Workers Resist. First off, I just want to say thank you for this panel. I was feeling really isolated and demoralized at Labor Notes. This made it worth coming down. You got a few questions. I'll give you a little bit of grace if I ramble a little bit, but my main questions are, one, what does the next step look like for this coalition? Can we have another meeting, like a national Zoom meeting, to bring more people into this discussion? Two, how do we bring this into the local level and start having sustained United Front coalition work at the local level? And related to this, how do the panelists see a coalition like this orienting to mass struggle when we have to march alongside separately, but alongside reformists, and the labor notes crowd like Mayday Strong? And I ask this in the context of work that I was able to do in Madison in coordination with folks up in Minneapolis. There's this large coalitional meeting that was launched in Minneapolis after January 23rd called the Workers' Assembly. And the Workers' Assembly there brought out like 400 activists, right, to vote on resolutions and talk about next steps for the movement. How do we get our unions and our socialist organizations, our community organizations, all on the same page about what we are going to fight for together. And I think we're going to have repeated opportunities for these kinds of struggles, even like around defense of the elections. And I think it's important that we do take up those struggles and we're willing to go in alongside these people that we're opposed to within the labor movement, because we actually have to expose them. We have to be able to put forward the best strategies and tactics for the movement in order to win people over who are otherwise just going to go toward them. This is what we see at labor meetings, right? They come here because this is all they know. It's all they see. We have to be here. So like in Madison, we tried to take the Workers' Assembly.
We got to get to the next person, so just wrap it. Yeah.
We when the movement started to ebb because of the leadership, we tried to turn those people into getting organized in the workplace to prepare for the next struggle. So how do we use this to defend, to fight against data centers, to defend against, stealing the elections, that kind of stuff. Anyway.
Thank you. Let's go to the person here and then over here to the people meeting. See 1, 2, okay.
Hi, my name's Alan. I'm with CWA 7250 out of Minneapolis. So I am for a little context, I have one question for the panel and then like a question for the room. So I am a new organizer. I would consider myself a new organizer. I started organizing in 2021 with Activision Blizzard and forming one of the first AAA tech unions in the country. So I'm very used to the phrases "killing your darlings," giving up on ideas that you think are good, but don't work. So I felt a lot of sentiments on the panel and in the room that there's disappointments in reform caucuses. So why or why not do you support reform caucuses, and what do you think could be done differently? My other question for the room is my sibling in struggle brought this great point about the worker assemblies. As a working class, do we want to work within the liberal democracy establishment by forming a working class party, or do we want to build counter power outside of the government and electoralist establishment?
Thank you. We're going to move the mic over to him. Gentleman in the back, right there.
Can everyone hear me? I'm losing my voice a little bit. Teamsters are really good at screaming at the top of their lungs at 2 in the morning. Hi everyone, my name is Jacob Apnick. I'm an Amazon worker from San Francisco, DCK6 warehouse. I'm with Teamsters Local 2785. I also work with the Internationalist group. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the first night of Labor Notes, where there was a film screening of the 2023 UPS contract fight. documentary called Who Moves America. Some people in the audience here were also there. And, you know, it was, you know, as we all know about the 2023 contract fight, it was a really disheartening betrayal of work of the UPS workers, particularly the part-timers. And I found it notable that, you know, in a room full of mostly TDUers with some rank and filers there, including some of my coworkers, the only people to not applaud at the end of the movie were my coworkers. Because they just by, you know, knowing nothing about this contract fight 2 hours ago and then watching it on screen and watching how it played out and seeing the betrayal in real time and being able to pick up on that because it resonates with their own feelings about, you know, organizing within the Teamsters was really powerful. And so, you know, when I got up and made the point that, you know, what is the union difference for the part-timers? What is the union difference? It makes my job harder as an Amazon worker, as someone that's trying to organize in their warehouse, when I can't point to, you know, $25 an hour starting wage for part-timers at UPS is something that we could fight for at Amazon. You can make less working part-time at UPS than you do at Amazon, which is absurd. And there's a scene in the movie where they say, you know, a strike is a school, but we have to go to class then. TDU in this metaphor,
That's time,
TDU
you can wrap it up.
is true. And so, you know, this is the point I want to make about the fact that TDU is an organization, is a reform caucus that's focused on union democracy, which really means subordinating, you know, the power of the union to the state, subordinating the power of the working class to the Democratic Party. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody in the corner over here? You want to go back to the, all right, let's go to this in the front classes. And then after this, we're going to go to the online.
Hi. Hello?
Okay.
Does it work?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Julian. I'm a local 27 Blazer here in Chicago, part of the IUPAT. And my question is more for the IUPW guys. So how do you guys feel about building a international kind of front of building a solidarity between the trade unions and the building trades? Because I know that there's definitely I'm an IPT and we have some people in a number of different district councils that are kind of in the same kind of state right now. And yeah, and also I was gonna ask how, when you're talking about organizing the unorganized, because that's something that's big for specifically my local, with non-union people and other trades taking some work. How did you go about organize? Are you basically flipping non-union shops to union shops, independently from the union leaders? Or yeah, I was just, maybe that's something I can talk to you guys after, but yeah.
That's great, thank you. And we were going to go to the online. Can you bring the microphone up to the, sorry, can you bring the microphone up to the desk here?
So we have 56 people in the chat right now.
Woo! Oh, wow. Online viewing for,
Yeah, that includes an online viewing party in Portland with CSEN and also a Spartacus League viewing party in Oakland. So it's even more people than that, actually. So it's pretty exciting. Got a lot of questions that we're sharing from each person who asked some questions. I'm sure we're not going to be able to discuss everything, but we have a contact form that we've been sharing in the chat. People to get in touch so they can continue these conversations. And I assume that we also said we were going to be collecting people's contact information today so that we can have a lot more conversation about the questions that have been raised so far. So from the group in Portland, the CSEN group, they asked, how do you see a fighting workers movement and the needed class unions coming about? And what organizing can we do in the present to help get there and contribute to the organizing of a class union united front? Why don't we formalize a regular class struggle convention like Labor Notes? From Blue Ridge IWW, what is the strategy for organizing the unorganized by the committee to organize the unorganized? Is it to press IBEW to expend more resources for this task? We have Kelly from AFSME in Texas.
What advice do you have for organizers trying to grow a more militant labor struggle among coworkers who are burned out, uninterested, or influenced by heavy anti-union propaganda? My union is AFSCME, the Union for State, County, and Municipal Employees, which is closely tied to the state and local politicians. We have Nevin Zer from Bogota. He asks, is for a fighting labor movement an explicitly communist, revolutionary Marxist, revolutionary socialist, proletarian revolutionary pole within the class unionist wing of the labor movement? And do the vestigial McCarthyite anti-communist attitudes in the USA offer obstacles to explicitly stating this? We have Melissa Lee with the NALC. She says, I'm Melissa, former Starbucks workers organizer and fired worker, and now a current letter carrier with the NALC. Establishment labor leadership will often accuse militant factions within our unions as being divisive or further fracturing the movement. How can our various militant groups collaborate more and support each other to build radical power across unions to demonstrate that class unionist ideas actually foster less separation between workers and their industries? Then we had from Marion, she asked, what makes a revolutionary situation? How can the class defend itself if not by organizing for revolution? Why are we not in a revolutionary situation? How do we get there? How does that change the task of revolutionary organizing? So there's a lot of discussion in the chat on this point about what a revolutionary situation is, whether we're in one, and the question that Marx raised of the class in itself versus the class for itself. So it'd be great to hear, maybe you all could incorporate some of that into the responses that you have. From Cynthia in SPFE 28, she says, Mayday Strong is clearly the program of the Democratic Party and business unionists and labor liberals. How do people with a class struggle orientation relate to it, given that the unorganized working class will undoubtedly be swept into its current, if our goal is to build a mass movement? And Luke D asks, what are the tangible goals to building organizational capacity? What does that look like in practice? Is it just to promote leftistier ideas than labor notes and hope more workers join in? Or is there a model that could change the balance of power in favor of the rank and file? So we'll also save the stuff from this chat so we can share it with you guys later.
Great, thank you. All right, that was a lot of questions. A lot of information. Hope you all have late flights tonight. I'm gonna give the panelists 1 second. Hunter, are you, Hunter? While the panelists collect their thoughts on that myriad of questions that just came out, would you like to speak to how folks can stay connected before we give the panelists a chance to respond and wrap up? Can you give the mic to Hunter? So there was a question, the first question, their second question was about how to continue this after this. And we already had planned to talk about that. So here we go, Hunter's gonna go through that.
Yeah, so.
Check.
Yeah, I'm gonna just give one more comment actually, just on my box. It was from Joe W., supporter of the Internationalist Group. He'd been asking before, I wanted to make sure that we share his comment. He said, you talk about a fighting labor movement, but the basis for class struggle unionists is independence from the capitalist government and parties. Yet some of the groups sponsoring this events, like the transit workers, are supporters of the Spartacist League, which entered the DSA. That is part of the boss's Democratic Party and have been there for a good 2 years, while others, like Teamsters Mobilized, want to support a slate of pro-democratic bureaucrats, the so-called fearless slate against O'Brien, who is fiddling with Trump. So you're really playing the same game as labor notes and the union sewers of TDU. And then you won't let us speak against that. Your talk of a fighting labor movement is just hot air.
Okay, we just let him speak against it. So, Hunter, if you want to tell folks how they can stay connected after the end of this, and then we'll give the panelists a chance to respond or ignore.
Our coordination meeting, our last meeting before we came to this event was we discussed that after a week, we'll be emailing everybody who's gotten into contact with us just to update you on some debriefs we've had. In like 2 weeks, we're gonna meet as a coordination and discuss next steps. And so if you want to be in contact, if you want to continue to move forward, getting your union or workplace to endorse this movement, you can still go to the For a Fighting Workers movement website. That should be linked. I believe Teamsters Mobilize has a good stack of the leaflets for this event still on their table, and maybe some on CSAN too. And that you can find our website there. There, if you send us an email, we're collecting the contacts there for one, and we'll be in touch about where this goes from here.
Great, thank you. And now the panelists are each going to have 3 minutes to respond to all of that and make any finishing remarks. And then we do have the room until 4 p.m. So at the end of this wrap up, we would like to invite folks to continue this discussion amongst each other. So let's just start at the end of the, or do we have an order for this? No, we don't. So let's start at this end and have Tom go first, and then we'll work our way down.
Great. Great, yeah, I want to thank Joe W. for making a pitch. I think everyone who's interested should check out the Just Break Already caucus in the DSA. It's check it out online. It's devoted to fighting to break the DSA completely from the Democratic Party. And that's a key task because it's a large organization and we need to forge the basis for our genuine workers' party. And that's going to take political struggle. And that brings me to another point. The one thing that I really want to address was this idea of reform caucuses. Do we support them or don't we? What would we do differently? We absolutely are in favor of taking the fight, a strategically important and necessary fight of overcoming the union bureaucracy. We will not beat this pro-capitalist perspective. We will not beat class collaboration or the dead end unless we win this struggle against the trade union bureaucracy, unless we reforge our unions with the new leadership. How do you get a new leadership? Well, you have to form caucuses. You have to form groups within your unions. It is so important that youth these days, they go into the unions and establish themselves, work discreetly if necessary for a period of time to get in and be part of the working class movement. It is part of your future, of our future, to get in and fight to overcome this obstacle. The obstacle is especially pernicious in the United States because it's an imperialist country that can dole out a lot of money to trade union bureaucrats. But we know that this is an absolutely necessary task, and that's, I think, what a lot of us are dedicated to. Also on the question of parliamentary, do we support candidates who are absolutely not part of the Democratic Party? Yes, we do. We are supporting, for example, Sawant's campaign for Congress, and a number of others in any distinct place in this country. People who want to actually run on with a socialist program in opposition to the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And they would often deserve critical support or even outright support, because we need to build the basis for a workers' party that would carry the struggle of the working people, not just in the economic realm, which we have to have, but also into the political realm. And you can do no bigger favor to our enemies than to vacate this struggle, than to just say, oh, we don't have anything to do with the unions, or we don't have anything to do with those people. You have to, and you can't always just say, oh, let's form a completely different union. Because the fact is, workers in vulnerable situations, they're going to look to unions with powerful bases, historical bases, like the Teamsters Union, like the UAW. And we need to transform these, not fetishizing it, but moving forward.
Thank you, Tom.
So I will focus on why not support or not support reform caucuses and like how to build international work with other militants across the world. So when it comes to do we support reform caucuses or should we work within reform caucuses? Well, I'm part of MRAC, so we are a reform caucus. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who are in these unions and they're tired of being silenced and they're trying to figure out something to do. And a lot of us come with a lot of different ranging of ideas, but that's like the state of the working class movement, because like we live in a bourgeois society, so those ideas are going to crop up. And so within MRAC, we try to find like basic points of principles where we can unite on, and we're ultimately all have united on that the IM needs to be transformed into a much more militant organization that's actually trying to fight towards a worker-led country. And so I think like that's the basis there for that, because like if we're not trying to do this, then we're not being that serious, because then we're just isolating our fellow militant workers. And at a time before I joined MREC, there was times that I held on to some of those ideas. Like I was in Wichita, Kansas, felt like there's no organizing going on. Then I listened to an episode by MCU called The Importance of the Industrial Proletariat. And I was like, oh shit, I'm in a large industrial union. There's a lot I can actually do. And so like through that experience, it made me realize that there's a lot of stuff I can do. I don't need to be part of like DSA or PSL or one of these bullshit organizations. That there's a lot as workers that we can actually do to transform society, and it's up to the working class itself to do that. And lastly, I want to finish off on how to build international work. There was a comrade who we met at Labor Notes from Brazil, and they talked about how at their local that they passed a resolution to support the Seattle workers and Seattle, the Boeing workers, when they went on strike. And that was like really inspiring to see. And then they filmed a video and to show their workers that, and to show the Boeing workers that we're all in solidarity together as a working class. And IAM's district president, John Holden at 751, never showed those workers that, which is outrageous. It's outrageous. And so like that's the type of stuff that we're trying to do at MRAC, is trying to make those exposures of these labor leaders who don't want us to unite as an international working class. And because they want to keep us chained down, they want to create all these divisions amongst the working class. But yeah, I'll wrap it up there.
That was a lot of very interesting questions, and I mean it's really evidence of how like hungry we all are to discuss these questions of how do we advance our movement and deal with the obstacles. There's no way we can talk about all those things right now, but I look forward to continuing our discussion in some way nationally and then certainly locally. You know, a number of us who are in New York, we already have been working in, you know, local United Front work to support the different strikes when we go out together and talk about how to support each other's struggles. Okay, of all things to talk about, there was a very general question of how do we build the fighting workers movement, and I think obviously, yeah, we're in unions and we're fighting within the unions. I mean, that's an essential component of being able to build up an actual fighting workers movement, not just on the economic struggle, but the political struggle as well. I mean, we've talked about the need to break, you know, our class away organizationally, ideologically from the capitalists, from the Democratic and Republican parties, because both parties are, you know, trying to court the working class and say that they're, you know, they're going to be out there on the picket lines. But there's no way that we can do that as a class and act politically independently and form our own party when we're so weak in the union movement right now. When so many workers aren't even going on strike, or when the strikes that happen are kneecapped by the union leadership, when we have all these laws that restrict our ability to strike and workers aren't sufficiently organized to, you know, break those laws and still go on strike. So that's why we need to be fighting within our unions, which are organizations, you know, encompassing all of our coworkers, and where people can learn through the struggle, in part, what our interests are as a class. But then it's our responsibility to talk about what those interests are, that they're not just for, you know, these stronger contracts or for our unions, but ultimately for us to be in political power as a class in our country. That's the only way that we can address all of the myriad issues that we've been talking about today and throughout Labor Notes. So, yeah, and I'll say in terms of like this grouping, there was a question, is this like a Marxist revolutionary communist, united front? I mean, obviously a number of us are those things, with, varying ideologies and tendencies, but no, this is not like the Revolutionary United Front class struggle group. For all of us, there's workers who are involved in our various groups who are fighting militant trade unionists. Where we have certain unity on principles, including, like, for example, in TM for a worker-led country. But yeah, I just did want to answer that question from the audience. As for, I think I'm close to time, but May Day Strong or things like this, I mean, we need to put out sharp critiques of this and expose them, but also reach the workers who are drawn in and involved in these types of groups.
Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely agree that this shows both this discussion, but also I've kind of been feeling it for a little while, especially during the surge in LA last year, about this real hunger. There's a real hunger there for a non-sectarian approach, and there's a real hunger for the working class to act. Like during that surge, the main response was from community activists, and obviously that's a decent and noble thing to do, the patrols and stuff like that, but the limit of the actual power of it was immediately apparent when they come in with the full military, basically the Marines and whatnot. The idea of having the working class behind it is really powerful and wanted by the left and the community. Now, from the working class angle, obviously it's been tough. So, I do think that one of the things, of course, is for people in the left, for youth, to actually join the working class and to be kind of a seat for building these class struggle opposition. Because the biggest obstacle within the working class really is the fact, like, a lot of these ideas are popular, I should say. Like, a lot of different things we put forward can be popular, but the main response is it's impossible, right? And the current leadership, the current bureaucracy just seems so formidable, and that's why all these contracts can pass with 80%, persuasion, whatever. Is because people, it's not like they love it. It's just that they think it's better than it could be, because you're just gonna get fucked one way or the other. So I think that's really an important thing to do. If we can build these things up, I think we will see that kind of start to change. I feel obligated to respond to Joe W. He is from ATU 1277, my local. And so, I think the main thing is, like, what do we need to do, right? We need to take these ideas, we need to take our positions and what we're fighting for into every possible arena that we can. Like whether it be in the DSA, where there are lots of people who are there for decent reasons. They think that they're socialists, this is the thing that they've looked to. We need to go there. For May Day Strong, we need to bring the problems with May Day Strong, we need to bring that to there. Like, we can't be like boycotting the May Day protest because it's put on by May Day Strong or the Democrats, but we should obviously be raising things that expose this very problem. And it's not just about like saying the words too, it's about exposing it in actual action. What are the things that we can put forward that are something felt by the working class, but which these people cannot touch because of their program, because they are looking to the Democrats, because they seek to accommodate. They cannot raise these things, they cannot do these things. I mean, what we went to May Day was on the CDL issue. We raised to preserve pay and seniority, which is something that our union leadership is standing against. And so that was not just like the words, actually, like No to ICE, by the way, was an official slogan of that in Los Angeles. So like, it was definitely a good thing that our union had this banner as well, but to actually put the leadership on the spot, to have to do something, not just words.
Thank you.
My heart is full, and my revolutionary soul is rejuvenated.
Oh yeah, brother.
If you had told me 10 years ago that I would be in the IBEW in a caucus with the positions we have, with the brothers and sisters in that group, that was like a dream, right? To build what we've built, it's a very small beginning. to imagine that we would be in a room with this many different leftist organizations and the caucuses and the unions that they support, and be able to have a panel like this, and that someone from the IG would be in the audience asking a question, and that Joe would be in the audience from the IG asking his questions. Next year when we do this, I want to see twice as many left groups and their supporters in the trade unions on this panel. And I want Joe to be one of them. Right? This is a militant who has been fighting for revolutionary politics in the trade unions for decades, like myself. And we have serious political differences. I am a member of the DSA. I think there is revolutionary work to be done in the DSA. Joe and I disagree, right? But that's the discussion that the left needs to be having. And to the brothers from the trade unions.
Joe says, I'll see you in the streets.
Yes. And we will, and we will. We will. Organizing the unorganized, right, is the key to advancing against all of the divisions in the building trades. They have chopped our union into so many different parts, so many different unions, but even within each union, so many different units. And even within the units, different classifications, different pay grades. All of this comes from the union leadership's defense of the profitability of the contractors. They sign no strike agreements, project labor agreements, community development agreements. Why? To keep the contractors profitable. They have a scab on teachers. They have a scab on refinery workers. They have a scab on hospital workers. And they tell us it's so that you can have a job. We need to go out and we need to organize the unorganized in our own union and turn our union into a fighting vehicle that the non-union worker wants to join. And then we can go out there and we can bottom up, organize these shops on a mass scale and do it through strike action that actually shuts down job sites until a non-union contractor signs a union contract. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, we need unions that are able to fight and able to win for the working class. And what we're up against is a monstrous monopoly capitalism that's organized on an international scale, that has ample resources to just throw away and dump. And so what we have to have is a union movement that unites the masses of workers, not just 8% of union workers trapped inside of these backwards regime unions with leadership that is demoralizing the working class and habituating the working class in these patterns of collective bargaining and sitting on their butts and accepting defeatism and the crumbs is the best that we can get. And they have misled the working class in that way. And what we have to do is to re-embolden the working class to fight. And we have to clarify that this is a violent, coercive struggle between two groups, the employer class of exploiters and the exploited class of the workers. And that is a situation that's enforced by the violent, coercive powers of the bourgeois state. It is not a democratic harmony that incorporates two classes. It's a dictatorship of one class armed to the teeth against the other class, the working class. And the working class has to be able to accept the risks associated with actually fighting, sticking up for yourselves, entering and standing up for ourselves and fighting back. There's consequences to that we have to look at and accept and organize ourselves from that basis of bravery and solidarity and building our relationships with each other to do that fight. And the working class, just like any muscle that has to be built, its capacity to fight has to be built through the strength of entering into that conflict with the boss on the level of the economic struggle. And that's why we're building the United Front from below, the Trade Union United Front. So within this effort, part of what we've been able to do to bring these groups together is by focusing our unity around the trade union organization. So we all have a plurality of political perspectives, and that's something we recognize. But here, these are groups in the union movement united through our shared emphasis on the necessity of a class orientation for that struggle. The objective conditions for revolution, they're not here right now, but the capitalist crisis guarantees that the capitalist economy, the overproduction crisis, it gets worse and worse and worse every day. And so we're seeing more and more workers from the middle classes getting thrust into the ranks of the proletarian. So we know that that fight is going to continue to amplify. We'll have more proletarians at our backs. The capitalist class is shrinking into a small group of billionaires, trillionaires now. They're eating themselves alive, but the working class masses continue to grow and grow day by day. So we see this as a hopeful moment for the working class. The triumph and the past defeats of our class will be overcome through first the United Class Union Front from below, and in unity with an international communist party, which has to lead the way in our opinion. But again, we all have our different political point of views. What we say is that we have points of unity on our website. That's what we're organized around. We envision this effort growing into a potential class struggle alternative pole to the labor left reformism and labor notes. We want to link across our local struggles to build a general movement of the working class. And we want to link these struggles, link our resources, link our knowledge as a class and our fighting forces in the union struggle together, and to support you, all of you here, into organizing in your workplaces in this way, and standing up and being brave together, and linking arm in arm, and standing up against these bastards in the capitalist class, and kicking them down, and rising up together.
Thank you. All right, thank you, everybody. I want to, before we depart, I want to thank some people who may help make this possible. There were a lot of people involved in the organizing, so I'm not going to get to all of them, but I want to thank everybody who participated in a way that took a role for today to make it possible. We had Dan doing sound. We had Robin and Reed doing timekeeping. Dave and Hunter were online moderating. And Ari was walking around with the microphone so that you all could be heard. And I want to give, I want to thank all the panelists, and I want to thank all the folks who hosted watch parties online. And we want to again thank the groups who organized this. They were Teamsters Mobilized, the Committee to Organize the Unorganized, Committee for One Fighting Transit Union, Transit Workers for a Fighting Union, Class Struggle Action Network, and the Machinist Reform Action Committee. Thank you all for... Thank you, everybody, for coming. We hope that the spirit of camaraderie, debate, and discussion will continue, and we hope watch parties are doing that at home, and that we can continue to do that within this room if you didn't get a chance to talk. So let's all talk to each other, and thank you, everybody, for coming.